All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. This is one of our last conference sessions for our 2020 virtual conference series on promoting independence for life. My name is Stephanie Garner, and I'm the program coordinator at Down Syndrome Indiana. And we are going to be talking today with Mr. Phil Clark. And Phil will be presenting to us on how to plan for future independence. Phil is the founder and CEO of Enable Special Needs Planning, and he's also the sibling of a beautiful young lady with Down syndrome. So really excited to have Phil with us today. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors, About Special Kids, Family Voices Indiana, Mass Mutual Midwest, and Mr. Gordon Holmes, and Shepherd's College. And our feature sponsor today is About Special Kids. So thank you, About Special Kids, for helping to make all of this possible. We would actually encourage you to learn more about Special Kids and our other virtual exhibit hall companies and programs at www.ddsindiana.org/virtual-exhibit-hall, and you can learn more about all of the organizations who are exhibiting, and a lot of them have even shared videos with you, so you can find out more about what their organizations do. So without further ado, Phil, I am going to hand things over to you.
All right, Stephanie, thank you. I'm excited to be with you all today, whether you're watching live or the recorded version. I'm excited about this. As Stephanie mentioned, my name is Philip Clark. I'm the founder of Enable Special Needs Planning, where we believe that everyone has the ability to impact the lives of others. And I believe that this is what planning should be focused on. And I know that sometimes these conversations about planning for the future can be emotional and can be difficult. I've been in my ever expanding role of serving families who have children with special needs for over 12 years. And so I know from having these conversations with families across the country that they are emotional at times and they are difficult and it's hard to think through. But I also, as Stephanie mentioned, I have a sister who is 31 and has Down syndrome. So I also understand that from a personal family experiences standpoint, that talking about the future can sometimes be difficult. But I believe that each of you are watching this here today for a reason. And everybody here's reason might be just a little bit different. And that's okay. But I think it's important before we jump in for you to pause and really reflect on why you took time out of your day today to join this session. What is it that you're trying to accomplish when it comes to planning for your child's future independence that you want to get out of today? And I got a question for you to help you with that. So if we were sitting down a year from now, what would have to happen in those 12 months for you to look back and say, I am really proud of the progress that we have made as a family in terms of planning for our son or daughter's future independence? What would that be? And I think that's important for you to really get a good handle on why you joined our session today. I'm excited to share with you my presentation. I'm going to share my screen with you. Just one second. Stephanie, are you seeing my screen?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. You're seeing the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay. Just want to make sure before I got going. So I think also it's important that you guys, and I understand that you guys are all coming in here in this time together in different stages. Some of you might be coming today brand new, really for the first time thinking about what the future for your child looks like. And that's amazing. I'm so encouraged that you're taking the time and effort into looking about what the future holds for your loved one. Some of you might be thinking more about how do we continue on the plan that we've already created? You might have been to different seminars. You might have talked to different professionals, and you realize that you have put some strategies in place, but you think maybe there's additional things that you need to consider. And lastly, many of you might be proud of the progress that you have seen. You might have put together the strategies that you feel are going to be most impactful for your family and for your child. And really today, you're just looking for confirmation that, yes, you have done everything in your power to plan for your son or your daughter's future. And regardless of where you are in here in these three categories, my goal for today is to give you peace of mind. Peace of mind that either what you are doing currently is absolutely what you should be thinking through and having the conversations around for your child's future, or giving you the peace of mind that now you feel like you have a roadmap of what types of conversations that you need to have as a family. But peace of mind, ultimately, I believe, is what we're all searching for. And that peace of mind can mean different things to different people. But that's really what I want to provide today for you. Before we dive um, into the content, I think it's important for you to understand a little bit about me and my background, because I do have a unique perspective of what future planning should look like. And so, as Stephanie mentioned, I have a younger sister with Down syndrome. And when Sarah was just born, for just like so many families across the country that I've talked to over the years, my parents didn't get a congratulations from the doctors. Instead, my parents heard, "I'm sorry, your daughter has Down syndrome." And over the next few weeks and few months, various doctors and nurses and professionals each gave my parents their limited expectations for Sarah's life. My parents heard things like, "Your daughter might not be able to ever ride a bicycle. She might not be able to ever be in a mainstream classroom. She might not be able to ever live independently." And those were just a few of the long lists of limitations that these doctors and professionals gave my parents regarding Sarah's future. And one of those things that my parents heard in the exact words from the doctor was, "Most kids with Down syndrome usually don't learn to read, and that they should expect the same." And if those doctors were to have followed Sarah's life, we were to fast forward 31 years later to today, they now find my sister working in a second grade classroom, where one of her many duties in that classroom is tutoring the kids on their reading abilities. Just the same thing that doctors said she would never be able to do herself, she is now teaching others. And I don't want to get into the detailed stories, but I could tell you story after story about how Sarah finds purpose and fulfillment in her day-to-day activities. And she has been able to help so many kids overcome challenges. But every single day, she feels like she's making a difference in the life of these kids. And to me, this is what planning should be focused on. To me, this is where our belief comes from, that we believe that everyone has the ability to impact the lives of others. And this is what gives each and every one of us a strong sense of purpose to our lives. And everybody here on this call today, we all strive to be purposeful. But we are not unique in that ability. My sister Sarah is not unique in that ability. And your child is no different. I absolutely believe that your child, in his or her own unique way, absolutely has the ability to impact the lives of others. And the great thing is, I know that each of you believe the same thing. We all have that common belief. But I believe that this is what planning should be focused on, allowing our loved ones to be able to find purpose and fulfillment every single day of their life. And so today, what I want to walk through with you so you can get a sense of where we're going. First, I want to help you define what independence means for your child. And independence is going to look very different from family to family. So it's important for you to identify and create that clear picture of what independence looks like. And number two, who should be on your team? And we know that we're going to take a team approach to planning for the future. We can't do this alone. And how should we compile that team? And number three, what conversations do you need to have with your team to plan for your child's future? And we have about an hour of time today. And I want to make sure that we leave time at the end for any questions that we have. So we're really only going to be able to skim the surface. So I have a free resource that we have put together for those of you watching live or recorded that will help you dive more into the details of each of these three pieces. So, and we'll talk about that at the end. So when we talk about independence and you hear that term and that word, what's the first thing that comes to mind to you? It might mean different things to different people. Maybe when you think of independence, you think of the job or their daily volunteer activities or how they're involved in the community. Maybe that's the first thing that pops into mind for you. Maybe it's something to do with education. Maybe it's a college program that's available. Maybe it's another program that's more of a post-high school furthering education program for your child. And there's so many of those available. Maybe it's their living environment, whether they're living on their own or with some support, or maybe with you, but having a little more independence. Maybe independence means their living environment. Maybe it's their decision-making abilities and how to continue advance those abilities that they have to make good life decisions. Transportation is another one. Fulfillment and happiness every single day of their life. And there's so much more that I realize that you likely think about when it comes to planning for your child's future. But when we think about all of these things, it doesn't have to just be independence, doesn't have to mean them living alone. I think that's one thing that I want to make sure that we understand is that even my sister doesn't live on her own. She still lives with my parents, but she finds fulfillment and happiness every single day of her life. And to me, that is what success looks like. And so I'm going to use these two words pretty interchangeably today, independence and success. And we're really talking about the same thing, but it's up to you guys to paint that picture of what independence looks like. What does success look like? And have you written that down? And that's why I'm going to spend the first part of our time together helping you identify what that looks like. And I realize, as I mentioned at the beginning, sometimes these conversations are difficult. And thinking about what future success for your loved one might be something that's hard for you to think about, especially if you have young children at home, because there's so many unknowns about what the future holds. But I want you to know that that is okay, and that is absolutely normal in having difficulty thinking of what success for the future looks like. And so I told you the story about my sister. And I told you about how doctors told my parents that she would likely never be able to read. And then seemingly fast forward 31 years later, she's now teaching others to read, right? And I love that story, and I share that with so many families. But what I didn't tell you was so much in between. I didn't tell you about the countless hours that my family spent driving here to Indianapolis, which was 2 hours away growing up, for different therapies and services and doctor's appointments. That today she is now using those foundational abilities and have built upon to be able to get to where she is. I didn't tell you about the hours and hours and hours that I remember spending reading to her, teaching her how to read and teaching her those skills that, again, she's using today. I didn't tell you about how she hated school so much growing up that she would hide from every teacher she could have. And every moment she had, she would slip out of the classroom and hide from the teachers. And I look back at those moments as a proud big brother, and I look at that and I find that kind of funny. You know, she was pretty smart and witty, and she didn't want to be at school, so she hid. But for my parents, in the moment, I guarantee you they didn't find that funny. And I guarantee you that if you have told them that she would be working in a second grade classroom today, they would have told you that you were crazy. And so my point with that is we might not know what the end result is. We might not be able to look 10, 20 years in the future and say, this is what success looks like. But that's okay. We've got to focus on what does success look like in the short term and help continually build upon those abilities that we see in our loved ones. So the first point of whose vision of success are you pursuing? Again, it's so important for us to have that written down, have that vision of what success looks like, but we have to understand whose vision of success is this? And this is where it really comes into play of, I believe that we've got to focus on the abilities that we see in our loved ones that are going to allow them to have success in the future. And that success is going to continue to unfold, but it's got to be centered on our loved ones' abilities. Second, we each are going to have negative expectations, and we're going to hear limited expectations from professionals, from family, from friends, from the media. That's just part of life, and it's unfortunate, but we've got to make sure that the vision of our child's success isn't focused on what others believe is true for our child. And then third, kind of the complete 180 view of that is our instant gratification culture, or our social media, or shows like Born This Way. And there's nothing wrong with these. I love that show Born This Way, and I love Instagram and seeing pictures of different people, but we've got to be careful not to judge our success or our loved one's success based on the success of other people. And that's the whole point with that. Make sure we're focused on our child, not what other people are doing. And again, it goes back to the fulfillment and happiness that we see and that we want for our loved ones. And that fulfillment and happiness is going to change, and it's going to evolve over time. So we've got to be flexible in this. I know for me and for everybody joining, the vision of my success, of what my future looks like 5 years from now, is going to be very different. And the same is true for my sister. The same is true for your loved ones. And so it's very important for us to be very flexible in the approach of how we're planning for the future success and the future independence for our loved ones. And what's holding you back? I think that there's always going to be obstacles that we face, because nothing in life that's worth pursuing is going to be easy, right? Each of us are going to face obstacles in our pursuit for creating success and independence for our loved ones. And we have to identify what those obstacles are. So while I really encourage you to write down what does that vision of success look like for your loved one, we also got to write down and identify what are those obstacles that we likely are going to face, so that we have a game plan of overcoming those obstacles. And so the first one, again, goes back to others' limiting beliefs. These we're always going to hear people tell us what we should or should not pursue for our loved ones. Maybe it's your own limiting beliefs. Maybe there's things that you're telling yourself at times that's holding you back in your planning process. And we see that a lot, and our team helps families overcome oftentimes their own limiting beliefs about what the future could hold. Maybe it's unachievable expectations. Again, it goes back to, if we're defining success based on somebody else's success, maybe we need to reevaluate that whole process of what independence looks like. And there's always negative emotions that pop up. Oftentimes I hear families say, we feel overwhelmed, we feel frustrated, we feel confused. Maybe you feel worried or afraid, or something that we hear a lot when it comes to planning for the future for our loved ones is, we feel stuck. And so it's so important to have ways to overcome those negative emotions, because I find those emotions are what stall people at times in their planning journey. And just the inability to envision success. I talked about how it's so important to write down your vision of what a great life for your child looks like. Have it in writing that you can see, so that you can daily work towards that. And families tell me all the time, we don't have time to plan for today. How would we ever think about planning for the future? And even if we did have time, where do we even begin? And so everybody here watching the live or recorded version, you each, maybe some of these are appropriate for you or applicable for you. Maybe they all are. But I would encourage you, we've got to have an action plan of how we're going to overcome those negative emotions. And so the second part of that is, who should be on your team? One thing that I've come to realize is that we can't do this alone. We really need a team surrounding us for so many different reasons. We need people joining our team that are going to help us pursue that the end goal of what success and what independence looks like for our loved ones. And there's different people that I want to encourage you to think about being on your team. But first, I want to share with you who I believe, or what roles these people are going to play. So we need people who are going to provide encouragement when you're faced with challenges. As we mentioned, everything worth pursuing in life is going to be met with challenges. And so we need the people surrounding us who are going to encourage us when we feel challenged and discouraged. Who are the people on your team that are close to you that are going to help celebrate those big milestones or maybe small milestones? But we've got to have a way to celebrate what we're doing and focus on the positives. And it's always so much easier and better when we have a group of people around us being able to celebrate with us. And then third, we need to have people on our team with diverse talents and gifts, because these people are going to play different roles for your family and for your child. It's important to almost develop a board of directors for your child to help to navigate through life to create these opportunities for our loved ones. And then there's going to be different people who have different perspectives of what success looks like. Me being a sibling, I have a different perspective of success than sometimes my parents do. And so it's important to have those different conversations and the different perspectives of the opportunities that we can create. And then again, this goes back to the challenges that we're all going to face. We need people on our team that can help solve problems and creatively find solutions to the problems that we're going to face. So who might be good people for you to invite to be on your team? Obviously, you as parents, you're going to be driving this process. You're going to be inviting people to have these conversations, and you're going to be facilitating these conversations at times. And you're the person that's closest to your loved one. And so ultimately, you're going to have the final say of what this plan looks like. But I also encourage you to invite the siblings to be part of that. As I mentioned, me being a sibling, I know that there's a lot of times that I have a different perspective of what success looks like for Sarah than my parents do. And I sometimes can see different abilities than my parents can see. And so it's important to get your siblings, the siblings' input on what success looks like. And there's always going to be extended family members, grandparents, aunts, and uncles and cousins who want to be involved in seeing your child succeed and be as independent as possible. And the same is true for family friends. And there's a lot of key professionals who are really need to be members of this team. You need to have a CPA, you need to have attorneys, you need to have financial advisors who can help navigate, not only navigate, but understand the vision of what you're trying to create, but help you make sure that the strategies are in place to be able to get there. And then most importantly, one thing that I think that many of us leave out, the most important person of this team is the individual that we're planning for. They should absolutely have a say in how we're planning for their future, correct? And our family found this out the tough way, and it wasn't intentional. And many years ago, as we were having many conversations about how to provide security for Sarah in the future, we spent many months trying to figure out who would be the trustee, how things would play out. But one thing we never did was tell Sarah what the plan was. And not only about her success, but just about her security no matter what happens in the future. And I remember clearly the day that we realized our mistake was when it was after church one Sunday. We were all sitting around at my parents' table and just having a normal conversation. And Sarah interrupted us. And she said, "I have a question. What happens to me if mom and dad die?" And we immediately realized how much we had failed Sarah at that moment. And my mom rushed over to Sarah and gave her a hug and said, "Sarah, sweetie, no matter what happens to us, you will be provided for and you will be loved. And you can do whatever you want. You can live with your brother Philip and his wife, or you can live with your younger sister Sarah or Grace. But whatever you decide to do, you will be loved and cared for." And she broke down in tears and said, "Good, because that's something that I've been worried about for a long time." And so whether we think about it or not, our loved ones are concerned about what the future looks like. And so my view of planning shouldn't be only focused on what happens if my parents are no longer here. It needs to be more bigger picture conversations of how do we create success. But my point is, your loved one, when and if it's appropriate, they should absolutely have a say in what their future is. So they're a key member of this team. And one of the other reasons that I believe that it's so important to create a team is that we've got to make sure that this vision of success continues to happen no matter what. And we've seen this um, throughout the past few months. There's a lot of uncertainty going on in this world with COVID. And if you weren't here, would somebody else be able to pick the pieces up and continue this vision of what success looks like? And unfortunately, I see this in my role far too often. There's so many phone calls and emails that we get that are similar to this, where there wasn't a plan, there wasn't a communication for what success looks like. And this was an email that I got earlier this year from a sibling whose mother unexpectedly passed away. And she is now trying to figure out how to pick the pieces up and love and care and support her two twin brothers that live in a different state. And she told me so many times throughout our team helping this family, she said, Phil, I wish my mother and I would have had these conversations. It would have made this so much easier. And so creating this team, creating these people that are going to support you now, but also support your child in the future if something were to happen, is absolutely so important. And so what are the conversations that you need to have? So we've talked about creating the vision of what success looks like, right? And writing that down. We've talked about making sure that we have a team together creating this plan. But what conversations does the team need to have together to actually make this work? And so the big question that we're getting to is, what does success or independence look like for your loved one? And that seems like a basic question, right? But when we break it down, this question becomes a lot more difficult because we need to think about success and independence in many different realms. What does success look like in the next 12 months? What does it look like in 2 to 5 years? What does it look like in 10 to 20 years and 20 years and beyond? You can see this question starts becoming more and more difficult to answer, right? And then we had the complexities of, what does success look like for your loved one in terms of their independence, their social life, their spiritual life, education. You can see the list continues to move forward, and maybe you have other areas that you're measuring success. And so as we look at that, this question of what does success look like? What does independence look like? It becomes very daunting. And so I don't encourage your team to start with this question. Instead, I really want to encourage you to focus on questions that are focused on their abilities. What are the abilities that you see in them that you want to continually nurture? Where do we start? And so I want to give you a few questions that I want you to consider for your team. As I mentioned, I have a free resource for you at the end of this. I'll share you how to get it, that will go through all of these and so much more. So feel free to write notes and write these down if you'd like to, but I also have a resource for you that I want to give you, a guide that's going to walk you through this. So one of the questions that I encourage you to have with your team, because we're focused on the abilities that you see in your loved one, is, when did your child exceed your expectations or surprise you by their abilities? And then the subcategories of that is, what did they do? How did they do it? How did that make you feel? And how did it make him or her feel? Again, it's focused on the abilities that you see, and it's the questions are trying to help you create a conversation, create a narrative, write a story about this. I think through those conversations and through those stories, you'll be able to identify those unique abilities in your loved one that will create opportunities for success and independence for their future. The second question that I encourage you to have with your team is, what has been your child's greatest accomplishment to date? And that's a tough question, right? Because many of you have a lot of accomplishments that you're so proud of in regards to your child and what they've done. And so you might have 5 or 6 different ones, but it's important for you, again, write those down, have those conversations. Have the conversations around, why did you feel it was his or her greatest accomplishment? And what made it such a great accomplishment? And did your son or your daughter also feel proud of this in the moment? How did it help boost their self-esteem? And how can you encourage and nurture similar behaviors or similar opportunities? Or how can you recreate opportunities for them to feel successful in moments, to continue to boost their confidence and self-esteem? And then what activities does your child enjoy? Success and independence has to align with their natural likes. Just like any of us, there's not a cookie cutter process and a cookie cutter plan of here's what success looks like. So we've got to focus it around their likes and their dislikes, and their abilities. And so it's oftentimes that we've got to think creatively about how to create opportunities. And so to help me illustrate that thought and that process, a few years ago, we began working with a family, and their son had a diagnosis of autism. And as I was learning about the family, the wife was so proud of her son, you could tell. And she was telling me about his experiences through high school. And she said, Phil, we couldn't believe it, but he graduated from high school with a degree. And we never thought that would happen. And we worked and worked and worked, and we had the tutors in place to make sure that he was able to have success. And then she continued boasting in her excitement. She said, he got into college. And again, we restarted the process of finding ways that we could provide support for him. And to our astonishment, he graduated from college. And you could tell she was so happy for her son. But then her demeanor changed. And she said, but Phil, he's been sitting at home for 5 years now. He hasn't been able to find a job. And as I asked more questions, I found out that her son was brilliant at computers. And she said, but he just can't get past an interview. His social skills are lacking so much that 2 minutes into the interview, they stop it. And he's been so depressed and so discouraged about not being able to find a job. And so I told her, I said, we've got to think creatively about what his likes are, about what his abilities are, and how we can creatively put together a plan that's going to allow for him to land this job. And I said, we need to find a job coach that, number one, is going to help him improve those interviewing abilities. But also, we need to find a job coach that's going to go to that potential employer and say, here's the abilities that this individual has and how they could impact your business if you were able to look past the seemingly lack of communication. And the mom excitedly said, well, does that person exist? And I said, I don't know, but we will find them. And we found a job coach that did just that and helped this individual find a job. And so my point with this is, how do we think creatively? How do we think outside the box to be able to provide the opportunities for success and the opportunities for independence? Got to think creatively outside the box for that. And then another question is, what abilities do you see in your child that you want to continue nurturing? There's so many abilities that you guys have, that you guys see in your child right now, that will pay dividends if you allow that to continue to nurture. My sister loved reading, and she loved kids. She might have hated school, but we saw that there were two things that she had natural abilities in. She liked to read, and she's very warm and nurturing. And so we didn't understand and realize that could be a way that she could feel purposeful, is by working in a second grade classroom. But we helped her find ways to find confidence in many different abilities. And two of those abilities, reading and being nurturing, really have allowed her to find fulfillment and purpose every day of her life. Another question I want you to ask your team, or I want you to ask yourself, is when did you witness your child making a difference in somebody else's life? And ask the team that you've created. Ask them that question. But flip it. How has your child made a difference in their lives? I think you'll be shocked with the answers that you get from your team, and it'll allow you to think creatively and think beyond maybe the limitations that you've been told in the past of what success could look like. So again, what does success look like? What does it look like now and in the future? And so if we went back to that first question of what does success look like in all of these different areas, that was a difficult question. But as you start breaking it down and really starting to write that narrative of what success looks like, of what fulfillment and happiness and natural abilities look like, you can piece together the success for your child in terms of all of those different aspects of success. So I want to encourage you to have those deep conversations with your team. And so just to recap what we've gone through, it's so important for you to visualize this level of independence. Visualize what success looks like for your child, because it's so important to us to focus on that when life gets tough. And so you defining your version of success and independence for your loved one, it's so important. Number two, we talked about who should be on your team as you're planning for your child's independence and success. And then three, lastly, we focused the majority of our time and the bulk of this on what conversations do you need to have? And those conversations need to be deep. You know, we went through those within 10 minutes, but I encourage families to have deep conversations and deep thoughts on what areas your child is impacting others already and how you want to continue nurturing those abilities. And I mentioned that because we only have an hour, we're only going to be able to scratch the surface. So we have a free guide for anybody who's watching this live or the recorded version of walking you through those conversations, walking you through creating that vision of success, walking you through how to select your team, how to have the conversations of asking people to be on your team, and how does that process work? And then what conversations, once you've created your team, what conversations do you need to have? How do you facilitate these meetings? And how do you evolve those conversations as your child grows and develops and those abilities continue to be blossomed? And so if you want this free guide, our team would be happy to send that over to you. If you want to send an email to info@enablesnp.com, we'll be happy to send that over to you. And what this is going to do is allow you to have that framework of what these conversations need to be like. But one thing that we find, while we find that the most important step of the planning process is understanding what that vision is, it's important that we have concrete planning steps of how to actually get there. It's one thing to say this is what we want, and this is the vision of success for our loved ones, but it's another thing to say these are the steps that we've implemented and the strategies we've implemented to make this become a reality. And so how our team serves families and the value that we add in families is creating that structure. So our foundational planning system does just that. It creates a concrete strategies in place for every family to be able to accomplish this vision of what success looks like. It includes meetings with me to understand that vision and to help you overcome the challenges that you're currently facing. It includes meetings with our financial advisors to help you create a plan for your family and for your child so that you can achieve these levels of success that you want for your loved one. It also includes meetings with our attorney to make sure that your legal plan is aligned with what the vision of success looks like now and in the future. But ultimately, this foundational planning process is going to give families security and peace of mind that they're doing everything in their power to plan for an abundant future for their loved one. And if you go to our website, you'll see that our foundational planning process is $1,200. I recognize the effort that you guys have taken of taking time out of your day, and I know that you guys are serious about planning for your future or your child's future. And so for people who are attending this live or the recorded version, I want to offer that foundational planning system and completely waive our team's fees for that. And so if you want to learn more about what that entails, you have a lot more questions, and I'll give you the specific details on that. Either send me an email or you can go to that link and just mention that you saw us on the DSI conference, and we will gladly waive that fee if you feel like we would be of value to your family. And so I'm happy to open it up to any questions. And if you have questions and you're watching the recorded version, you can feel free to email me, info@enablesnp.com. Our team will get back with you. If you want more information about that free offer, or you want the guide that we offered you, feel free to send us an email. So Stephanie, are there any questions?
Sorry, Phil, it took me a sec to unmute myself. I don't see any questions.
If we set our focus on what does success look like, we got to make sure that success happens today, right? We got to make sure that it happens tomorrow. It's planning for the future shouldn't only be about what happens if my parents pass away. And that was one thing that I was frustrated with my industry was that's all the conversations that my parents had early on was what happens if they pass away. And I looked at that from a proud big brother standpoint. And I said, no, I believe that planning should be focused on allowing my sister to feel happy and fulfilled and purposeful every single day of her life. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Phil. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll have some families reaching out. I know I'm
absolutely.
definitely going to be emailing you about that resource because we have a little bit of planning in place, but we definitely need to do some more. So
Well, we're happy to help however, and that guide that I mentioned will lay out